Hello, Internet. My name is Chamomile.
And I'm Requiem, but why are you dancing?
I don't know. Honestly, I was kind of hoping you would know about this kind of thing.
It's probably the flower crown.
What? It can't be the flower crown. My best friend gave me the flower crown. My best friend wouldn't put a curse on me.
Cam,
Yeah, no, I felt it as soon as I said it. It was the flower crown.
right? Let's not accept any gifts from any fairies for the rest of the journey back, okay?
Are you sure you're Requiem? That doesn't seem like a thing Requiem would say.
I mean, at this point, does it matter?
I mean, I guess if you can co-host a podcast. Yeah, we are going to go talk to this Nettle guy, wherever he's hiding, because he wanted us to kill the Stag Lord, which we were
He's down by the river.
gonna do anyway.
He's a spooky zombie. You got 300 experience and you get a little event. So, yeah, not worth it. You might have some sort of spear on him, as I recall.
Sweet. We can loot his body for... This is just a spear. Like, it's got a special little glowy thing on it, but I see no enchantment.
No, when you have to pick it up and then somebody will identify it. So it's a short spear +1, not worth it at all.
Hooray! But it was not worth it on camera, so hopefully it was, entertaining to watch it not be worth it. And he talked about how Pharasma awaits, which almost makes me kind of wish that, we had just left him there. Like, if I had known he was going to talk about finally going to his rest, then I probably would have just been like, let's, having accomplished the task, just never let him know. Let him wander the earth forever because he is too lazy to go and check. Sure, I'll bite.
This is, if I recall, I think this turned out to be a boggard settlement.
I dimly recall something about that in the tabletop version, but I thought it was in a different part of the map.
It's abandoned. I think this one is one they made up. This is part of one thing that Pathfinder does that I've never been a fan of. So you've got boggards, who are the evil frog people, and then you have Gripply, who are the good frog people, because those needed to be separate things.
Yeah, in fairness, that is ported straight in from D&D, where grungs are generally speaking good, and bullywugs are generally speaking evil. Neither of which, as far as I know, are product identity, so you can actually just copy those. It's legal.
Huh.
It's in the SRD. Like, I don't know if you can...
I mean, that's just one of the things where, like, so I feel like 3rd edition had moved forward on a lot of stuff in good ways. Like, they were moving away from having racial alignment. Even, like, they had the thing where an alignment for race would be, like, usually or always or only. So, like, it was, like, usually that just means, like, well, about half are this alignment, but then half aren't. And they were moving away from having, like, you got the good version of the race and the evil version of the race. You just have, there's a race, and then some of them are good, some of them are evil. But with Pathfinder, they really backtracked on that. Like, they doubled down on alignment. They doubled down on racial alignment.
Baffling decision, by the way. As early as AD&D, in the Giant Drow series, they introduced the Myconids, where the whole thing with the Myconids is that They are not an evil race, but they do look kind of funky. They're these weird mushroom people.
It's funny enough that you mentioned the Myconids. So they're not product identity, and they're in Pathfinder. And guess what their alignment is?
I mean, it's supposed to be, like, lawful neutral or some shit, so I'm guessing chaotic evil for no fucking reason.
Lawful evil.
Oh, okay. At least they're lawful. But yeah, one of the most interesting things that GMs discovered they could do fairly early on was throw creatures that looked like they were evil, but actually weren't. So, if you were a reasonable person who asked questions first and killed things later, then you could avoid a combat and pass through a section of the dungeon safely without having to cut your way through. Save your resources for the insane bastards who will try to kill you on sight. And you know what the easiest way to do that is? Just have orcs be reasonable people sometimes. That way you don't have to come up with a new race every time you want to pull that trick.
Yeah. And like in general, like it's uncomfortable to have like
yeah, like
always evil races are almost always kind of uncomfortable. Like especially for the mortal races, it's like even if you come up with a justification, like it's like any situation you're like, well, should we be breaking all these kobold eggs? Like that feels really uncomfortable, even if in world kobolds are always evil. Like that still feels deeply uncomfortable. And like in general now, when you have an adventure, like you're not attacking a kobold town, you'll be attacking like a kobold like raiding party.
Right.
Anyways, like because it's uncomfortable. No matter what justification you come up with, it feels gross.
This should do it.
Or not. Oh, hey, there's a guy right there. I completely missed him.
Pathfinder just backtracked on so much. Like they were trying to be retro with Galarian, and that's like I get why people want to be retro sometimes, but sometimes it's like there's stuff that we left behind because it was bad.
Yeah, the easiest and most straightforward example of this is Thaco. Because you don't have to have a philosophical discussion to say why Thaco is bad. It's just like, well, BAB is mathematically identical, but the math is slightly easier to do at the table. So that's just an upgrade. It's just better.
And it's always more intuitive for higher numbers to be better.
Right.
Stand down.
So yeah, it's
You offend me.
like, Thaco isn't like the most important one, but it is the one that is just easiest to describe. Oh, that's right, you're a kineticist. I've got to use your blasts.
And some of the designers have talked about, like they were kind of inspired by Conan for Galarian, and again that's fine, but like there are parts of Conan that are not great.
And like race essentialism is a pretty big part of Conan. For the most part, there's this weird sort of equality to it where like races are ludicrously distinct from one another, but they are sort of all good at different things. Like your race is your class, essentially. But for the most part, they are all more or less balanced against each other. So, like, that's definitely a thing. And, like, to be clear, I tried to give a nuanced...
Click on the... wait, don't leave the map. Click on the fire pit.
Like, I tried to give, a nuanced description of the racism in Conan, but that's not because it's okay. Like, it's just, because I value accuracy. Like,
yeah,
that's a lot of race essentialism. It's not an okay thing to have. It's not something you should be emulating. And again, with the racial alignments, which, Conan didn't have an alignment system, so it wasn't nearly that pronounced. But, having personality traits be very common amongst certain races gave it a sort of racial alignment system, and that's not good for storytelling, especially interactive storytelling with players, because it means you can't have plausible uncertainty about whether or not those orcs are bad guys.
Yeah.
And having that uncertainty can make things interesting. And if you want it to be unambiguous, you can do that. It's on the other side of the river, isn't it? Okay.
It's like, I don't think it's, like, it's probably not, like, having, like, demons be always evil is fine, but also, like, the closer a group looks like a human culture, the worse of an idea it is to make them always evil.
Yeah.
Like, do we want to talk about goblins?
I mean, we have to sooner or later. Let's go
Yeah,
ahead and make that today.
They have not come up so far in my playthrough. Like, we ran into a group of goblins as a random encounter, but I don't know if there's going to be actual, like, a goblin quest, so...
I do not recall any from the tabletop. They'd have added some stuff to the video game, so it's possible that it'll come up eventually, but...
Pathfinder's
Share my path.
description of goblins, it sounds like a racial caricature of a race that doesn't exist, which I guess essentially it is. Like, you read it and it's like, this is so uncomfortable.
Yeah, like, I read it and, like, I feel like I'm offended on behalf of goblins, which does feel weird because there's no such thing as goblins. But, like, it hits all the notes of racial caricature, just without lining up to any caricature of any real-world race that I'm aware of.
There's supposed to be an encounter here.
I mean, is it a good encounter? Should I go looking around for it, or...
No, it would have happened automatically. There's like a gnome you can recruit to be your treasurer, but I guess it's like random. So I guess we'll have to just come back here at some point.
I'm pretty sure it's the only way across the river, so...
But like as far as I can tell, their description of goblins does not correspond to any real-world race or ethnicity, but it still feels like... It feels super racist.
Yeah, like, it hits the basic structure of a racist caricature in that, you know, it very strongly associates them with very specific character traits which are oversimplified, easy to grasp, and negative. You know, it turns them into simultaneously a joke and a menace in a way that's kind of contradictory. Like, how can they simultaneously be threatening but also goofy? And so, you know, in its self-contradictory nature of, you know, where racist caricatures, you know, want to portray the target, the victim, as simultaneously inferior but also threatening, which creates, you know, an inherent doublethink to it. And that's a very specific trope that Pathfinder goblins hit, like, you know, pretty much perfectly. Where it's like, yeah, they're a wacky comic relief race that also eats babies. Not because they think baby eating is funny, but because they want their wacky comic relief race to also be a genuine threat who should be killed on sight, without exception. They're not even a good mascot race, by the way. Like, you know, these guys were never going to be their franchise's Moogles. Like, they're not cute. A couple, like, some artists have managed to make them look like a sort of villainous chibi thing that is actually, you know, kind of cute and endearing. But it's something that a really good artist can pull off. Like, the 5th edition depiction of Demogorgon. Demogorgon's sort of canon description in D&D is
There's
real...
a dude right by that rock if you want to kill him.
Oh, there he is. I can never see these guys.
This will hurt.
Like, I was just wandering off in a random direction looking for the guy who was attacking me. Apparently he was right there. Half the time.
I thought you were like setting up something. And then I
Yeah,
realized
no,
you
I
could
just can't see
that
shit.
dude.
Fun fact, I have lost more than one game of Among Us because I have walked straight over a corpse. Not because I was the imposter and didn't realize someone else was in the room, but because I did not see the corpse.
Huh.
So, people reasonably conclude that since I walked straight past a corpse without reporting it, I must be the imposter. But no, I'm just blind. And to be clear, there's not anything physically wrong with my vision besides the fact that I need glasses to drive because there's, a slight blur on distant objects that makes it difficult for me to read street signs at ideal distance. It's a pretty minor impediment, and it shouldn't affect my ability to see a screen at all. But yeah, I simply do not notice things.
So we got to switch Blevin over to a great sword or something.
Yeah,
That's what Amiri was using.
I'm gonna grab him one sooner or later. I haven't bothered yet, which I probably should, because even on easy baby mode, they occasionally blindside us with boss fights that are potentially quite difficult. Which again, I realized I absolutely fucked up the Stag Lord fight the first time around in a number of ways. But, since it's hard to focus on a conversation and a game at the same time, I was kind of hoping that concentrating on the game would just be totally optional on the lowest difficulty. And it is not that easy.
At some point, we're going to want to pick up some...
You rascal.
You're going to want to pick up a bunch of acid flasks, not for game difficulty purpose, just because they will make something go much faster. There's going to be a lot of trolls with fire immunity, and
That's cheating.
they don't die until you hit them with some sort of acid. And I'm guessing Celawyn has acid splash, but having to wait for her turn again and again to actually kill trolls is going to be really frustrating.
Circling back around to before we got distracted by all that, though.
Goblins.
Yeah, the 5th edition depiction of Demogorgon. Demogorgon's canon description looks dorky. Right, he is a two-headed beast thing with, tentacles for arms. He looks kind of gangly.
And they're mandrill heads. He's got two mandrill heads.
But 5th edition's depiction of him looks really intimidating. He looks like a kaiju. So if you have a really good artist, you can pull off, making what is otherwise a bad monster design look really good, because they're just that good at drawing it. The fact that the thing they're drawing doesn't inherently look very intimidating just doesn't matter. They can make it look intimidating. And Pathfinder has had a couple of artists, I should specify, Pathfinder 1st edition. Pathfinder 2nd edition's art has taken a massive plummet in quality, which is very disappointing because that was always the best thing about Pathfinder. I mean, yes, but is there treasure inside? 4 gold coins. Okay.
So this map, if you clear the entire map, there's a treasure you can get, but I don't know whether that's going to be worth it because it's a pretty big map.
Oh, is it?
You're going to find, there's a ring, and then there's 3, pieces to the ring, and then you can open some treasure chests, and I don't remember if the treasure chest is worth it or not. It's been a while. I don't remember what was in it. Hey, trolls!
Oh, fuck, I believe that is...
The glowing one is going to be fire immune. The others are not.
Well, as long as there's just the one, then I can kill that one with Celawyn and... Trolls are kind of a big deal, though. Let's turn the not dying juice on.
I wouldn't have any experience with getting slaughtered by 3 trolls. Well, I actually wouldn't. I survived that encounter.
It's true.
We were level 1 or 2, and we get a random encounter, and it was 3 trolls, which, let me get out my ECL calculator.
Yeah, I should not have trusted Pathfinders. I should not have trusted them to have appropriately balanced encounters, because these ones definitely were not.
So a troll on its own is already CR5. So already it's going to be a tough battle. Whoops. So we have 3 CR5 levels, which is a challenge rating of 8, and we are like level 1 or 2. And for whatever reason, some of the party decided that we would actually try to fight the trolls. Damn it, Wildheart. So we lost like 3 party members. Then we only lost 2.
Yeah, no, we lost everyone who decided to stay and fight. Everyone who decided to run away got off scot-free.
Like,
it was still a ridiculous random encounter to have, and I should have paid more attention to those random encounter tables in advance, so I could have prepared something better instead of having to rely on whatever Paizo had to hand. But,
in your defense, like, as Troll on its own would have been a pretty tough fight for us. I don't know if any of us had any fire magic. And it's then it's a CR5 encounter. We're like level 2 at most. Like, we probably should have run away from 1. And also, I don't know if you had run any Pathfinder adventure paths at this point.
I had. But it was just the one, and it was for people who had the special request that they wanted to do a bunch of like epic level shit, which means they were basically impervious to everything the entire time. And I was like, all right, man, if that's the kind of campaign you want, I just kind of shrugged my shoulders and ran with it.
So you didn't actually have a good, feel for what the difficulty of Pathfinder stuff was, because I've heard that Mythic will very quickly make stuff into a cakewalk. I've heard that Wrath of the Righteous is just, once you start getting the Mythic stuff, is the easiest.
I mean, I suspect so, because the campaign felt balanced with like 1 or 2 Mythic ranks, but by the time it hit 3, it was just, yeah, no, this is ridiculous now. I'm just gonna shoot a guy.
We can do it.
So, the trolls have 2 claw attacks and a bite attack, which, makes a lot of sense. Except, the way that this game is depicting it, they just, they make 2 swipes with the same hand?
So, there's an explanation for what's going on with the trolls that the game gives. Cam's game had a different explanation, and I don't know if the actual tabletop has another explanation. Since I don't know if you've noticed, I can just give away what the explanation in the game is if you don't care.
I do not especially. We're going to talk about it eventually, and, it's...
So
There is an explanation in the tabletop version that was fairly similar to the one that I gave, so...
Then this might be interesting. So, you remember when Tartuk got resurrected for some reason?
No. So that's how much of an impression that left on me.
Well, Tartuk got resurrected. So I think he thinks he's a kobold now, and he has gone and formed a city that is an alliance between the trolls and the kobolds, and he's used his magic to give the trolls fire immunity. But they are still trolls, so they are still want to eat people. There's no peaceful resolution to that as far as I can tell. In the tabletop I played with Cam, the trolls were being aided by the Fey Court of Summer, who were using them as like a cat's paw to attack our kingdom. I don't know what the actual Pathfinder Kingmaker explanation for it was.
Hang on, you're the fire one. Oh, well. Oh, hang on, he still took damage from it.
Oh, it's just reduced.
Yeah, he has energy resistance.
Yep.
That might be because we're on easy mode. But yeah, to my recollection, the explanation in the tabletop RPGs is that they were ambiguously under Nerissa's command.
So I don't know if we've explained this, but Cam made some changes to the way the Fae operated. There were 4 Fae courts. The 4 Fae courts don't control all of the Fae, but a lot of them. They're each associated with a season. You've got the Summer Court associated with passion, the Winter Court despair, the Autumn Court fear, and the Spring Court is hope and creativity. Celawyn was formerly part of the Spring Court, but she got kicked out because they were tired of hearing her talk about mortals and how interesting they were. And most of the courts were loosely aligned with Nerissa, except for Autumn, because Nerissa, I think, was also part of the Spring Court.
Yeah, I gave her the Spring Court just because then she was the one personally responsible for exiling Celawyn, which...
This will hurt.
So the Summer Court was pretty closely allied with Spring, and they were using the trolls to attack our kingdom. We handled the trolls, and then the Summer Court themselves showed up. And this was not the first of my brilliant plans, but this was a long-running brilliant plan. Was I invited all the seasonal Fae are bound by their words. If you get them to make a promise, they cannot break the promise. So I invited the Summer Court Fae to come into the city and observe the passion of mortals. And that went super well, and there was never any problems with it. It was resolved very quickly. It was a great plan.
Yeah. So after
anything Camille's about to say,
I forget if it was immediately after or even before, but at some point, at the latest, very soon after the Summer Court had agreed to this deal, the party, at Celawyn's insistence, Celawyn was not voted down the one time she should have been, decided it would be a fantastic idea to put a hag in charge of their capital city while they were gone, who, of course,
fantastic idea.
instituted a reign of terror, and there's not a whole lot more that'll quash passion faster than that, so... The Summer Court were not impressed.
I know, but I had honestly forgotten Mother Sorrow. That was part of it.
Yeah, the Summer
I think
Court
we had
were...
already put her in charge, and I had forgotten we had somebody in charge of the city.
Yeah, so they were consistently unimpressed with mortal passions because they didn't seem to do much other than cower inside their houses as much as possible while, going outside as little as possible to fulfill necessary functions.
I did get that awesome dance in.
You did. There's this bizarre contrast for, the peasants of this town between Mother Sorrow's reign of terror while you were gone, and then every time you were there, you would try to hold some kind of festival.
So things were looking bad, so I'm like, alright, I've got to do something. So, to impress the Summer Court, I asked one of them to dance. And when I did that, Cam goes, alright, the Summer Fae has a look on his face that is exactly like the sort of look you'd have on your face when you were about to drown somebody. I was like, oh, this is going to go great. Since they're Summer Fae, they're, made out of fire, so the entire time I'm dancing with it, taking fire damage. So periodically I would break away from him and dance with this other Fae that we had in the town, in order so I could drink a healing potion. But I managed to pull that off, and I pulled it off without anything going wrong.
It is true.
Yeah. I eventually got the Summer Court to come around.
You did.
Once I removed Mother Sorrow from her position as ruler of the town. Oh, should we talk about the Will-O-Wisps? That was another brilliant plan. I'm not being sarcastic. All of my plans are brilliant.
I
What's
mean,
more enjoyable than having a sword of Damocles hanging over your head constantly?
but
So
yeah,
Billy's-
let's go ahead and make today's theme just be Tales of Celawyn's rulership in tabletop version.
and how brilliant she was. So there were these will-o-wisps on an island that we wanted to go to for some reason. It's been a long time, so but there were too many of them. Like we, every time we would run into like one will-o-wisp, we'd get our asses kicked. But I had an idea. So first of all, like, we were talking about not liking racial alignment. So I'm like, maybe we can actually negotiate with these will-o-wisps. They're like more intelligent than the average person, and like I kind of had the idea of having sort of like a kingdom of monsters. So what I did is I went over, talked to them, and I offered them to like come into the town and just feed on the ambient fear, so we could go into the island for whatever reason. And all of that was like, there's only so much fear to go around, so I had to figure out how to incorporate them into a civilization where they're not just going to start attacking people so they're afraid, because, everybody's afraid when they're dying, is apparently the thought of the will-o-wisps. And it was difficult because the will-o-wisps don't have a culture, so I was trying to figure out, like, how can I get them to, not just be regular citizens? Then what I eventually realized is, they don't have a culture, so I can just kind of install a culture into them where it's not appropriate to kill people so you can feed on their fear. So I figured that one out.
Rest is in order.
Like, you have to admit, I came up with a solution for that one that was pretty good.
You did indeed. You'll also note that I have engaged in excellent role-playing of maybe not Celawyn specifically, but certainly our Kingmaker party in general, which is that as soon as some bandits offered to join our kingdom, I immediately welcomed them in.
Look, Celawyn voted
Doubled
no.
their rations.
Celawyn voted no on that.
This is true. Well, I say not so much Celawyn specifically, it's just our party in general.
I tire.
I suppose what I'm really role-playing is that in the spirit of our tabletop party, every single one of her twinks was convinced that we had to recruit these bandits.
I also got the citizens of our capital to spontaneously, and spontaneous is in quotation marks, spontaneously declare me queen. I don't know if you remember that.
I dimly recall this.
So winter had come, and it had been bad because of the supernatural influence of the Winter Court. And we had gone, and defeated the Winter Lord, so the supernatural winter was going to end. And we had decided in the party that Celawyn was going to be queen, and I was like, you know what, I want this to be special. So what I did is, Celawyn sneaks into town with invisibility. She uses a disguised self to... Uh-oh. Oh, we've got to go deal with this crap. So I guess head back to Tuskdale. Or Bald Hilltop.
Yeah, I'll just take the most roundabout way I can manage.
So she sneaks into town, disguises herself as a regular mortal, starts the rumor, the true rumor, but the rumor that Celawyn has broken the supernatural winter, and that we should all spontaneously declare her queen when she returns. And when Celawyn returns, like, she's walking into town, and I had her, like, flowers were magically blooming in her footsteps, and the townsfolk spontaneously made her a flower crown and declared her queen. Of their own volition, with no interference.
I mean, there may have been some amount of enchantment magic involved, but who's counting?
It was illusion magic. Thank you very much. No,
There's
so
a
that was
lot of
when,
lightning strikes are coming down, like, within 10 or 15 feet of my characters.
Yeah, I have no idea if that does anything. That was also when Chamomile learned what a snowdrop is.
Yeah, Mercury, it turns out, knows a lot of flowers. Which, at the
So
time, I
describe,
assumed had come from, just some wiki walk on a whim at some point. But, given what I've seen of Arkansas, I think it may have been necessary to survival growing up.
Yeah, because I had snowdrops blooming where Celawyn sat, because snowdrops are a flower that blooms only in winter, and I thought that was very poetic. So it seemed appropriate. Are there any other brilliant Celawyn plans that I'm forgetting? I mean, all of her plans were brilliant, and none of them went wrong, but...
There's the one with the centaurs. That one didn't really have enough time to actually come to fruition, though.
So
Like-
there's these centaurs to the
Stand down.
east of the town who they were planning on destroying the other little kingdom, Varnhold. Oh, did we talk about Varnhold forward settling on us?
Yeah,
That's sort of that's a
Varnhold
pretty
did
important
not
part of Celawyn's
vanish
arc.
in my
It's kind of an
version.
important part of Celawyn's arc. So whenever we would get useless refugees, we just send them to Varnhold. And eventually they got sick of it, so they forward settled on us, which, as anybody who's played Civilization knows, is an act of war.
To anyone who is not aware, forward settling means that they, there was sort of an unclaimed territory between the two nations, and Varnhold was settling new villages and outposts, one in particular, in the direction of the border, rather than out towards the area that is, unclaimed for essentially until the edge of the map.
Yeah. So we conquered their forward settled, renamed it Iomede's Folly, and then we marched on Varnhold itself.
I decided that I think there was some mention of Iomade worship in, they had like a cleric of Iomade with them or whatever. I decided I was going to emphasize that as much as possible in my version. Because these guys were intended as antagonists rather than, victims in, I decided. It's probably the biggest edit I made to,
This should do it.
the, with possibly the exception of the fake hordes, this is probably the biggest edit that I made to Kingmaker, is making Varnhold, rivals, and then the Cyclops Lich who attacks them in the tabletop, like, he did show up, but, he just kind of also showed up later on. But, yeah, I decided, since nobody likes Iomade, especially not since Wrath of the Righteous came out, that I was going to really play up Varnhold's connection with Iomade, which I believe,
Defend me.
I can't remember for sure if they even had one. I do think they had a connection to Iomade, but it was, like, really minor. It's like a one-off reference. I'm always nervous about getting these things wrong, though, because, when I don't have the thing right in front of me, I can't double-check. And, I know for a fact that my memory for this kind of thing isn't very good, so...
So we got to Varnhold. and we're gonna try to besiege them. So one of the other players had the armies had our armies burn all the farms, but then there was the thing of like, oh, so everyone in the town is gonna starve now, which offends Celawyn's poetic sensibilities. It's like in it's like that quote in the Iliad. It is entirely seemly for the young man to lie mingled by the bronze spear. In his death, all things appear righteous. It is something different entirely for the old man to have his nakedness shamed by dogs. There's poetically appropriate deaths, but a bunch of people slowly starving to death are not that. So Celawyn objects to this, and
Celawyn objects to this after the farms have already been put to the torch.
I was not thinking it, okay? but we got a peaceful surrender, and Celawyn spends a pretty significant amount of time. You know, Celawyn spends a pretty significant time and resources. Like, I spent feats in order to be able to do this, keeping this town alive. Like, I got some spells that, I had some spells that allowed me to stretch out the food they had. There's this one spell that I got through a feat that's a druid spell that gets you, like, extra food. And we went to a lizard folk village and got them to trade with us. I don't remember exactly how we saved the town in terms of food.
You sent a bunch of your excess funds to ship in food from Brevoy.
Right. So Celawyn did a lot to save this town, which we also renamed Love Lies Bleeding.
This will hurt.
Fantastic name. Also a flower.
It's a poetic name for Amaranth. And that was sort of like the beginning of her arc of no longer treating mortals like characters in a book she was writing. Like, she was not willing to sacrifice a town full of people to get what she wanted. And so they're, having spent a bunch of resources defending this town, she also wanted to not have it be destroyed by centaurs, but she didn't want to just, you know, kill a bunch of centaurs. Like,
yeah, the centaurs objected to that town in particular because it was sort of like it was on their side of the mountains as opposed to their capital, which was not. But, you know, this town was on their side of the mountains, and the centaurs were philosophically opposed to the concept of towns. Centaurs are very impressive skirmish combatants, but they require an awful lot of food to sustain, which means they do not do well in civilization, where population density wins.
Yeah. Well, they're hunter-gatherers, and hunter-gatherers require a lot of land. Rather than just conquering them, like, Celawyn, like, negotiated with them and, like, look, you can sort of be informally part of the kingdom, and I will make sure that, oh, and we're about to meet,
Now, I'm not sure the option to recruit her and put her in charge of our capital is going to be there.
you didn't install that mod.
And I wish Pathfinder was the Kingmaker was the kind of game that had mods that bizarrely thorough. You really can't get that kind of modding scene from anything but an Elder Scrolls game, or a Bethesda game in general. The Fallout ones get it too.
But yeah, so someone's like, look, there's some benefits from civilization. You can get, like, iron weapons stuff. You don't have to, like, become settled. Not settle any more towns in your territory, and will prevent any towns from getting settled, and you'll just informally be part of the kingdom. There was going to be there's a party at Love Lies Bleeding with a bunch of, like, you know, like, food and such, and also Celawyn using magic to instigate love triangles. They're not love triangles this time, just regular love incidences. I'm sure there's a better word for that. What's it called when there's only two people involved?
I don't know, man. I don't go for that weird fetish stuff.
But you know, between the centaurs and the townsfolk, and also having some of the doing essentially a hostage exchange where some of the young centaurs stay in the town and some of the young people go off with the centaurs to learn how to be hunter-gatherers. So there's sort of this cultural exchange that brings the peoples closer. I don't know if that was going to work or not. I think the impression I got is that yes, it will.
Let's try this way.
Yeah. It was. Overall, it helped because the one Lich Cyclops who shows up is like the ancient nemesis of the Centaur people. So, having successfully beaten him off was a very, you know, it gained a lot of credit with the Centaurs. So,
Your time is over.
there's something we never got to do with the Centaurs because I had the whole game tied to seasons pretty strongly. You know, the economic situation changed depending on what season it was. The Fey courts were, of course, tied to the seasons. So like that. And one of the things is that the Centaurs went elsewhere for winter and would come back in spring. So there was one bit where, the reason why the Lich King woke up, I think this was taken from the adventure path, but again, I can't always remember these things especially well, is that a young centaur, essentially the centaur princess, she is the daughter of their bigwig, had gone poking around where she ought not and awakened, you know, a hideous and ancient evil. And I was going to have a scene where there were, you know, some centaurs who were basically like, okay, yeah, they defeated the Lich, but we're also pretty sure they woke it up. And, you know, this person who they had rescued, and so, you know, who felt indebted towards them would sort of have to admit that, no, I know for a fact they didn't wake it up because I might have possibly woken the Lich up. Which was a scene I was looking forward to, but alas, we never got back to spring, so I never got to run it.
Apocalypse happened.
Yep.
And the group fell apart. I like the idea that Ashlyn is just, he's not casting a spell, he just legitimately told a funny joke.
Right. And that, you know, Celawyn just has emergency glitter, and that is how she casts glitter dust.
Yes. And she's a fae, she's gotta have glitter on her.
I don't want to keep bringing up the music thing, but it is just so impossible not to notice.
A calculated risk.
Did I just run out of Inspire? Or did I forget to Inspire?
Don't know.
Yeah,
Away, you rascal.
there's a bunch of cool spells I could cast, but ultimately they will probably only slow things down because these guys aren't actually worth buffing for. The fastest way to kill them is probably just to run up and kill them directly.
The very last thing we did in the campaign before it stopped because Apocalypse was we fought the Winter Lord, and that was sort of the almost essentially getting close to the culmination of Celawyn's arc, because like the Winter Lord, as we were kicking his ass, he says to Celawyn, he's like, "Hey, you can just come and like you got exiled from Spring, but you want to just be a Princess of Winter? Like, we'll let you into the court." And she rejected him.
Yeah, because so early on, there were these piles and piles of character deaths, which sort of like worked out great for Celawyn. Like, sort of developed a character arc out of them. I say worked out great for Celawyn. I mean, in like a thematic narrative sense, it worked out very poorly for Celawyn.
Pull up the map. If you want to do, I guess you don't want to try to find.
Oh, the
Beldam.
Yeah, no. I entirely forgot we were there. I thought this was a random encounter. I don't know why they stuck a bunch of fucking bandits on her. Okay.
It's one of those excessively large maps. There's a whole bunch of crap going on this map,
Okay.
but as you were saying, all the people dying. Pull up hit M.
Right.
She's gonna be up. This next turn, you'll go up or north, I guess. North is up. Everyone knows that.
Yes.
The dangers don't frighten me.
What's that?
Don't remember this, dude.
I mean, if this is an old Beldam, I'm gonna be disappointed.
Come on, Ashlyn.
Do it.
And then I guess that works.
I'll share my path.
In his defense, he was drunk.
But yeah, so there was just these piles of dead bodies, which, I tried to make dying fairly difficult in my campaigns, but my precautions were insufficient. So, Celawyn was just seeing constant and fairly pointless deaths, which just grated extremely hard against, she had this vision of the mortal world, and of, the effect death had it on in particular, of just giving everything so much bigger stakes and, such permanent consequences. And then they all just...
Also, this is not Old Beldam, so we can just leave.
Oh, it is not?
It's not. It's something else. But yeah, so many deaths.
But yeah, so many deaths. Sorry, got involved in the encounter a little bit. Imagine that.
You
The
wanna
encounter
keep
was
exploring it?
moderately interesting. Is there anything else to actually find here? Like, you talked about there was a...
There's a wizard,
Right.
and like this area is going to get infested with trolls at some point. So we might as well talk to him now before it gets infested,
What a
because
find.
it's part of a quest to talk to him at some point. I mean, as long as we're here, we might as well, I figure. If fucking Ashlyn can do his job. Stop pouring the liquor on the fireball, Ashlyn. That doesn't work. But yes, the pointless
Yeah.
deaths.
So yeah, people had died, so many that, rather than, death giving everything, so much higher stakes and, such dramatic consequences, instead it just kind of happened at random.
It is done.
And so, it was just, rather than, serving as some kind of a dramatic culmination of someone's arc. It just cut people's lives off, midway through. It was death is bad, actually. And so I remember after like the second near TPK, which in my defense happened after someone had thought they had found a way of killing shambling mounds, like a foolproof method of killing shambling mounds, and went out in search of one where they knew they could find one.
I voted against this idea.
Yeah, at level 2, and they found one, and they sure did fight it, and like 2 of them sure did die. Like, I will take partial blame for the troll deaths, I should have looked at the random encounter table and realized this is not balanced. I should fix it. But for that one, that was the party saying, like, yeah, no, we're pretty sure that we've got some cunning trick that'll allow us to kill, like, a CR6 creature at level 2. We've totally got this. And they were wrong. Like, that was on them. They made a choice. There were consequences. But yeah, so Celawyn comes back from this, and she is digging mushrooms out of the ground in order to replant them into a circle to try and make a fairy circle she can get back into the Feywild with. And that is sort of, the start of her character arc, where, she's had this inciting incident where she, comes to a new and different world. Do we need the bald hilltop?
Yeah, that's where the stuff is.
Okay.
We're being attacked by spiders.
But yeah, and the world was not what she thought it was. It was terrible and she hated it. Which is sort of, very... it's obviously not the only way to set your story up, but it's a classic way of setting up your conflict for your protagonist. You thrust them into a new situation, and the new situation is not good for them.
She wanted to refuse the call.
Right.
She is similar enough to Elin from Order of the Stick that, like, having her say, like, no, I'm refusing the call would have been completely in character.
It's true.
You offend me.
But yeah, and so then, much time later, after she has adapted to the world, the Winter Lord basically says, like, hey, I realize, my prognosis on this boss fight is looking pretty grim at this point, and we're only, like, 2 rounds in. So I tell you what, I have a way of getting back and forth between the Feywild. You're only exiled from the Spring Court. Sign up with me, and you can go be a fairy princess again. Which, Celawyn got to say no to that because she had a character arc now.
Which is apparently pretty rare for D&D players, which always shocks me.
Yeah, a lot of D&D players, they don't create a character with, like, intentional flaws to be overcome. Usually they create a character who they think would be awesome, like, from day one. Like, they'll have interesting quirks, but not interesting flaws. The difference being that, a quirk, even if it's something like cowardice or greed or whatever, something that is a legitimate character flaw of some kind. Decent role players will very often have those, but the reason why I don't call them flaws is because they have no intention of really grappling with them. They throw them in for flavor, and it does make the characters more fun. But because nobody ever has a character arc, nobody has a flaw that they overcome, what you end up with is a cast that consists entirely of supporting characters. And they are interesting and fun supporting characters, but nobody has an arc.
There's one point I said to Cam, I was like, sometimes it seems like you like causing my characters pain specifically, and he's like, that's because you make characters who can feel pain.
Right. Is that, he had you make characters that want things besides, like, success in battle and treasure, which means that, I can actually give them a character arc, which are naturally very painful things, by, causing setbacks to these more ephemeral needs. Whereas with most people characters, their motivations revolve pretty strongly around, one of getting treasure or leveling up in some way or another, right? It's not often literally just greed or the desire to be the best like no one ever was, but it'll be something like, I want to reclaim my lost homeland, so I'm going to get a bunch of treasure so that I can raise an army. And, there's no character flaw inherent in that, right? Like, there's no personality trait inherent in that, which means that ultimately the only thing stopping them from embracing that destiny is the fact that, they need more levels to defeat the villain and more treasure to raise their army, which, I can totally work with that to the extent that it can be worked with, but again, every setback to that is going to be a setback in terms of treasure or character power, which are very frustrating, so I don't use them.
Yeah.
Whereas Celawyn could be frustrated by things like mortals not acting the way they're supposed to. So yeah, it was a character that I could torment without, making the gameplay itself frustrating. Okay, you look like you're some kind of boss fight, which is good because I was getting sick of these recurring waves of enemies. In fairness, 3 is a perfectly good number of them. But, when I have to find conversation to fill the space, I am getting sick of things quite a bit sooner than I would in a normal playthrough, because, I'm kind of just the whole time like, okay, how long is this going to take? Do I have to find a sewer level topic? With that being said, the length of that one dungeon, that was too big, not just because for Let's Playing purposes, but for any purposes. Way too long. My god.
Yeah. It was not fun. My thing with RPG is like especially in video game RPGs, I hate feeling like a plot elemental, and tabletop RPGs, like, they're the best format to not be just like a plot elemental.
It is their most obvious advantage over video games.
Like, even in pretty good video game RPGs, your character is usually gonna feel like a plot elemental. Like, occasionally you'll get stuff that makes it less so. Like, there's parts in like Dragon Age Inquisition where you can just drop sort of like little details about your character. Like, I played it through as a human mage, and there's one point I was talking to one of the advisors, and she asked about, before you joined the circle, what was your life like? And you had a bunch of choices, and I picked, I was a noble, and the characters just had a conversation about, they missed some of the privileges of being nobility, and it didn't really impact anything in the game, but it was just this conversation where it's like, okay, my character is a real person instead of just a plot elemental. Like, there's this little background detail, but I liked it. Like, there's another in New Vegas, you'd occasionally get stuff like that where it's like, it doesn't really impact the game in any way, but you can give this little detail about your character that sort of, like a little background detail that makes them feel more like a person.
Yeah.
Like, I like to feel, like I'm embedded in the world. Like, when we originally, when we started the Kingmaker campaign, I did not have Celawyn attached to any of the seasonal courts because I didn't know about them, because they're something that
I had
Cam
not
made up
introduced them
for the game. And when he starts introducing the concept of seasonal courts, I'm like, should we have Celawyn have been one of the courts? And he's like, well, if you want her to have been, that's up to you. I was like, all right, then I'll have her have been a Spring Court. That seems to make sense for who she is. Because I want her to feel like, she's part of this world and part of this story, and not just the plot elemental who shows up and NPCs get to do things for them.
Which, by the
Like,
way, like, if the gameplay on an RPG is good, but, you know, I find myself running into this plot elemental problem, my solution to it is that I usually kind of quietly rewrite the story in my head as, like, I am literally some kind of planar traveler who has just popped in, and, like, whatever thin, flimsy level of backstory I have is actually just, like, a bluff that I'm telling, like a cover story that I'm telling. And, like, yeah, I am, like, I've literally been sent here by, like, the multiverse cops or whatever to thwart some supervillain. And so, like, my character is actually here for something. You know, he's an outsider with some kind of 9-to-5 job interest in the place, where it's like, yeah, I'm here to save the world, but, like, that's because it's my job. I'm like a professional superhero. So, which, you know, explains the lack of attachment sort of coming and going that a lot of... And, you know, it's not a good sign for a game when I start feeling this way about it, but it's not uncommon, and it's a way that I get myself through games where they're fun to play, but I dislike the story. I keep pressing space because I want to speed up the walk animation, and it keeps pausing the game.
Yeah, that's there's a lot of these little quality of life things that could have been better.
Yeah.
Elder Scrolls games are usually pretty bad about the plot elemental thing.
Also to note, one obvious solution to the plot elemental problem, you can do what JRPGs do and have the protagonist be a fixed personality that the player has no control over, but, you know, that can be a cure that is as bad or worse than the disease, depending on what someone is looking for in a game.
Yeah.
I'm okay with both, but they are definitely very different experiences. So, like, you know, no amount of JRPGs is going to scratch my itch for... Oh, by the way, is the Bald Hilltoppers thing resolved?
I don't know. You might have to go back to Tustale and see.
Okay, well, let me...
Which it sucks that we cannot change that name. I
I've
think you need to
seen...
assign an advisor to
I have seen
study
YouTube
it.
videos where the name is changed. I don't know how, but...
Because you gotta change it to, like, Briarheart or something.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, like, I do really like JRPGs, but no, scratch my itch for a good Western RPG. And part of that itch is that, yeah, I don't want to be the plot elemental. I don't want to be, you know, sarcastically thinking to myself that, yeah, I am some interdimensional doppelganger who is bluffing these rubes into thinking I'm a local while I solve their problems and collect my paycheck. You know,
It's our birthday. Without a doubt, this will be a feast for the eyes. Like, that kind of implies it's like sexy sword fighting. I think you need to have somebody do the eight-legged plague.
Ah, that's the one.
He's a success chance of 55%.
There, spend a crisis point. That should get it done.
Oh, and we're being invaded by trolls.
That feels pressing. But also, we can hold a celebration.
Damn it. This is in character. But we can have Kiernan be in charge of the celebration and let Rhaegar be in charge of the trolls.
This is true, and Kiernan seems like he would throw a better party anyway.
Yeah.
Definitely gotta spend a crisis point on it, though. A 55% chance of success on this is not okay.
If you want, you can turn on automatic success. I don't know if you care or not. We just have to visit the throne room for that one. Fun.
Well, let's save that for a bit there because... Aha, here's what I'm looking for. Ah, he's busy with something else. We still don't have our treasurer. I'm not sure why.